good afternoon. This is Kit Cabello of Hard Lens Media. Today we have a very special interview here at the Q4 radio station. You can listen to Hard Lens Media every Saturday from 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. Central Standard Time on Q4 Radio, 1680 a.m., or you can watch us live on our Facebook page. We're on from 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. Central Standard Time. Today, I'm joined with one of our very special guests, Shana East. She's one of the key board members of Our Revolution Illinois. You might have seen her be interviewed by us a few times before, as well as be a guest on our show. And this is the first time you're joining us for CanTV. So, Shana, thank you so much for joining Hard Lens Media.
Thank you for having me.
So, I think for our viewers who are going to be watching you on CanTV, it's important for them to at least know who you are, and can you just at least give us a background in your history of activism and grassroots volunteering?
Sure. So I, have been involved with politics since I was a teenager. I was on congressional debate and stuff like that. So that's where I got interested in politics. But I became more active as far as volunteering. On the Chuy Garcia mayoral campaign, I then became a staff member, and then went straight from Chuy's campaign to working for an organization called People for Bernie, which laid the groundwork for the Bernie Sanders movement, I would say, across the country before he even announced that he was running for president. And then once he had announced, my partner at the time, Jack Rabin, and I founded Illinois for Bernie, which helped get Bernie on the ballot in Illinois and laid the groundwork before the official campaign came to Illinois. And then when the campaign came to Illinois, I became a staff member. After that, I have been a board member of Our Revolution Illinois, and here we are today.
Yes, and you've been playing a huge role. I have to say, again, thank you so much for helping out Hard Lens Media, especially when it came down to covering events or even reaching out to the candidates. So, relating to your involvement with Our Revolution Illinois, you were part of a few other progressive groups as well. And what we've been seeing across this country, not only here in Illinois, but just all across the United States, is that the growing involvement of women in politics. And so, my question is, what is the potential for women to be part of the political process here in the United States, as well as being main organizers for progressive organizations?
So obviously the potential is infinite because we have such a limited role, I would say, in politics right now, and very little agency, and very few women are actually elected, to office. So we can only, grow. So we have tons of potential. It's just about, people taking female candidates seriously, and I think there's a lot of scrutiny that women are under as far as when they become candidates that maybe isn't so harsh for male candidates. Like, you have to be very put together, like how you look, how you present yourself, how you talk, your tone, things like that are, harder for women than men, I think, in the political arena. But I'm glad to see, I think, since the Women's March, I guess, more women are running for office. I'm not saying that that's the main reason why, but I have noticed that there's an uptick in organizations that are helping female candidates run, and that's great. So,
well, then, a real quick follow-up. What does it say about our current system and how it's being run? Because for a long time, for years, women have been cast aside, or some of their issues haven't been really fought for as much until perhaps maybe after the 2016 election cycle, where the issues of women's rights and their ability to participate in this election cycle. What does it say about our current system that took this long, really, to even get acknowledged?
I mean, we live in a misogynistic culture, and we're far from being perfect. I mean, we have a long, long way to go. I just think that some of these issues, like sexual harassment, are starting to be recognized now. Just starting. I mean, but that's just one thing. There are a lot of issues, I think it's common for candidates to say, I support women, I'm pro-choice, and that's it. They check a box. But there's a lot more to women than merely our reproductive rights. I mean, we're fighting for agency in our jobs. We're fighting for equal pay. We're fighting for, every time Social Security or benefits of some sort get cut, women are disproportionately affected because a lot more women rely upon these things, or medical family leave. So, I mean,
Yeah, and it's quite clear that the impact of Me Too and Time's Up is clearly growing and gaining more traction. But what's it really? What do you think is at the main heart of why I think a lot of organizations, from both politically as well as like a lot of social institutions, why do they remain silent?
I can't wrap my head around it. I mean, personally, I've gone through stuff like this in my own life, and it's terrible to have to deal with being in a work environment or a environment that you're forced to be in on a regular basis where something like that is happening. I think more women being in leadership roles is helping uh, bring recognition to this and helping address these issues. Um, but we have a long way to go.
So let's look at returning back to the election, especially let's look at the 2016 presidential election cycle. Many progressives and independents and Democrats wanted to be reformed in the Democratic Party because there was clearly election fraud that was happening. The DNC establishment, as well as the Clinton campaign, were for the most part rigging the primary or had some sort of involvement in the primaries to where Senator Bernie Sanders was denied the nomination to challenge currently now our President Trump. So going forward, there's still some pushback and resistance from establishment leaders in the Democratic Party. So, is it really possible to reform the DNC? And how do we hold progressive candidates accountable, even if they're endorsed by establishment Democrats that have been part of the problem or even cover up abuse?
I mean, I don't think maybe in the current state with the current leadership it's possible to reform it because uh, Democratic establishment has shown a hesitancy to want to listen to the people and make these reforms, like eliminating superdelegates, for example. Right. Something that most people want. They don't want the deck to be stacked against the people, but they don't want to change. So unless we have new leadership in the Democratic Party, I don't really see them wanting to change. They don't seem to see the progressive movement and the sort of reforms that they're pushing for as anything that they even acknowledge as important.
Right, and it's also important to note that when you have Speaker of the House Michael Madigan, who's been in power for 40 plus years, um, now it's being revealed that he's been covering up, sexual abuse allegations. Not him basically being accused, but he's been covering up allegations.
Yes.
Within his own party. How do we hold some progressive candidates who perhaps maybe been endorsed by Madigan accountable? Because this is a serious issue. Because if you look all across Illinois, it's just not Republicans that have a problem with Madigan. It's Democrats, Independents. A lot of people have a serious problem with him and how he's been running our state.
I really think the best opportunity we have for holding anyone accountable in this situation is to hold the progressives accountable, because many progressives are being supported by Michael Madigan or are working with Michael Madigan because they want to keep their job, because they are afraid of him, because that's how the system works. They have to play the game, whatever. So I think the best opportunity we have is to talk to and put pressure on those progressives, because they share those values supposedly that we share. So if we bring, our concerns to them, I think they would be more likely to be flexible, hopefully, than someone like Michael Madigan, who has operated this way for decades and has shown no intention of changing whatsoever. And then he has all of his other cronies and his chosen, hand-picked folks in leadership positions like the State Central Committee who are just there to back him up. They're not going to challenge him. So I really do think we should start to hold a lot of the progressives who have allied themselves with Michael Madigan for whatever reason accountable to what's going on, because it's not acceptable. If you're progressive and you say, I want to get big money out of politics, but then you're like going along with the Madigan scene, there's a conflict there. There's a dissonance there. because he is big money in politics.
That's true.
There's many conflicts if you're saying you're a progressive and then you're going along with these things that are not progressive. Like there were, multiple progressive candidates that were involved with either getting an endorsement by Michael Madigan or they pre-pledged their votes to Michael Madigan before, the election. We need to talk to them. We need to tell them our concerns and areas of where this dissonance is and especially with the sexual harassment allegation, if you say you're supporting women, especially women in politics and in government, women in these jobs in government or in political offices like Michael Madigan's office,
right?
How can you not support the women workers if you're progressive? So we really do need to do something.
And that was covered in detail during the women's forum at UIC when the governor candidates were all debating about that. They were talking about the history of sexual abuse and allegations that are happening all across Springfield. And that was way back in the fall of 2017. And even now people are still talking about it, but in many ways there's blinders are still put on, not enough actions being done. And the really key issue is to hold some of our elected officials accountable, starting with people in their association with Michael Madigan. Right? And so I think going forward, when this primary was happening, especially with Our Revolution Illinois, what were some of the main concerns that your organization has seen here in regards to Illinois politics and really the necessary changes to get voter involvement?
I mean, I don't know that we as an organization have come up with, a list of our group concerns. I, as a board member, my number one concern after going through this election cycle is really the effect of big money influence in politics. I feel like it's incredibly difficult for any progressive candidates to compete. We saw what happened with the state central committee candidates. An incredible amount of money was put in against them and these are volunteer level positions. These aren't even, like state representative, U.S. Congress. Like they fought them tooth and nail to keep them out of these Democratic Party leadership positions using wealth, using an incredible amount of money that Michael Madigan can raise because he has corporate donors, tons of money coming in. If you look at Illinois Sunshine, and I ask everyone out there to look at my friends of Michael J. Madigan on Illinois Sunshine, and you will see it's not a lot of individual donors. It's unions, it's corporations. These people are funding him and his projects, and then he's going in and he's opposing Democrats, mind you. They're running as Democrats. They want to help the Democratic Party. They're not
pushing back against
exactly. So I think he is the biggest obstacle to democracy in the state of Illinois right now.
Right. And it's again important to note, especially for people who don't live in the state of Illinois, they don't realize that there's a whole fiefdom of families that control the politics and political policy here in this state. It's been going on for a very long time.
And many of them are profiting, from their own profession off of the system, like they're tax appeal lawyers. So they're profiting off of the fact that we have a systemically racist property tax system. Like Joe Barrios, Madigan, Burke, all of these people are profiting. It's pay to play.
Pay to play.
And it's transparent. I mean, they're not hiding it.
So then I think for a lot of people who don't really understand about money and politics and how it's really affected our democracy, there's Citizens United and the McCutcheon's decision, which basically allows corporations to be people, money is speech, and basically the candidate with the most money is going to be the winner. Case in point, we saw it with our governor's race, in which J.B. Pritzker has now got the nomination to challenge Governor Bruce Rauner. So in this day and age, how do we combat big money and corporate influence in our electoral process? Can it be effectively challenged to where a progressive candidate can actually win?
I don't know. I mean, I know the solution is to get big money out of politics. I'm not quite sure what the strategy is that we need to, as progressives, come together and really, I think this is the number one issue because I think it touches everything. I mean, we're talking about the March for Our Lives is happening today, and a lot of people who support the Second Amendment are saying, you know, this is about freedom, and it's not about freedom. It's about capitalism. It's about gun manufacturers profiting off of having more guns made. So everything's going back to money, 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 money. And we live in this very capitalistic society. It's touched our politics, I mean, in a major way, to where people who would be the best public servants to help regular people can't even get elected.
Absolutely.
So I know the solution is to get big money out of politics, but we're going to have to figure out how we do that, because the lobby, I mean, just think of all the lobbyists out there, how powerful they are. The pharmaceutical industry, I think, is the largest.
Then there's the military-industrial complex. There's the banks, Wall Street, and even the top 1%, individual owners. The Koch brothers, for example, are most notorious. Even though they give money to Republican candidates, they're one of the key players who have basically bought many of the Republican officials and some, blue dog Democrats in the Congress and Senate. So again, it's an issue of money in politics. Those who have the most money buy our elected officials.
And in each of these areas, we're seeing like massive amounts of people suffering and dying because of these choices, like the opioid crisis. That has to do with the pharmaceutical industry. You know, people are being shot and killed in schools. That has to do with the gun lobby. I mean, so there's like a lack of morality as well, which brings me to like, there's groups, you know, the Poor People's Campaign. I don't know if you've spoken to anyone from that.
We actually did cover an event some time ago in 2017.
So I think it'll be interesting to see if movements like that really grow, because it's truly about working class people and a moral revival, so to speak, because I think it's been lost. I think there's a lot of people out there who are, you know, good people who believe in the right things, who are progressives, that are fighting their butts off to make a change, and it's, you know, they're just among elected officials and among our government, there is a complete lack of moral character, moral fiber, caring for people over profits.
Yeah. And we've also seen it firsthand with the prison industrial complex and how it profits off the war on drugs to where it gets free labor, or you can just call it slave labor.
It is slave labor.
From people who are predominantly African American, Latino, people of color. And this drug war has basically been allowed to continue on due to the fact of money in politics and now the growing influence of the prison industrial complex. So I want to return back to Illinois. And as we know, J.B. Pritzker is the nominee. You have Representative Danny Davis of the 7th, Lipinski of the 3rd, Representative Quigley of the 5th. They've all won their respective races. And many of these officials have ties with establishment leaders, donors, and other lobby groups. So what are your concerns about the 2018 midterm general election, and what does it say about future elections here in this country?
I mean, my concern is all these folks are going to win. I mean, that's a primary, but, you know, we have Lipinski against a Nazi.
Yes. I would never thought I'd see that.
I think Lipinski will squeak out, but who knows? Yeah, it's just that they're not going to be accountable is my number one concern.
How do we hold somebody like JB accountable? He's obviously has ties with a lot of people in the establishment party here in Illinois. He also has connections with a lot of financial interest groups as well. How do voters, the average voter, a working class person who probably has nothing in common with JB, how do we hold him accountable?
I think it's a big mistake to say, a lot of folks right now are saying, like, we got to beat Rauner, just get on board, get on the JB train. Like, you know, Troy LaRaviere is running for mayor. He's, I guess, the only progressive-ish person that's running right now. And he said on Facebook the other day, to quite some controversy, that he's just like, you know, we got to get over it, support JB now, like, we don't want another Trump situation, like, which I think is completely misguided, a completely misguided approach. We have to show that it's up to the campaign to earn our votes. That just because he's the Democratic candidate doesn't mean that we're going to just take him as he is. I think right now is when we come up with some demands, things that we want to see him move on, like we want Medicare for all, for example. We want a progressive income tax. He's been wishy-washy on it. He says I'm for a progressive income tax, but then he says other things that are like sort of like long-winded and rambling and not focused, and then I'm like, is he really going to fight for a progressive income tax? There are basic things that we should say now before he gets our vote. This is what we want. If you want our vote, even though it's against Rauner, this is what we need. And not wait until he gets elected and then try to hold him accountable, which he won't be.
With this governor's race, does it have some sort of any form of similarity towards the Trump-Clinton race for president? Because here you have two establishment candidates that perhaps maybe not a lot of people like due to the fact that they are very wealthy. Um, is there a chance that it could turn out similar to that, to where none of the candidates reach out to any voters until the very last minute?
Yeah, definitely. I see a lot of similarities. I see the way that the Democratic Party is operating is very similar. It's almost like a flashback. I mean, they're making all the same mistakes. They're not listening to progressives at all. They're not even trying to listen to progressives. They're using the approach of not Trump or not Rauner as their campaign. That's not good enough. We want to know what you're for. We want to know what your platform is. How are you going to fight for us? Or else we're not going to come out and vote. That's what's going to happen. That's how we got Rauner, because people did not turn out. And if you don't excite them and you don't tell them why this candidate is for them and how they're going to fight for them, they're not going to vote. And then Rauner will win again. And that's what happened with Clinton.
Midterms, though, have usually statistical low turnout. This primary, there were some significant wins for our Revolution, Illinois, but at the end of the day, there was still a low turnout, even though it was higher than the Republican turnout, especially for Democrats. How do we get millennials and young people involved and informed about our electoral process, even going past this midterm election cycle? Because the key thing is, millennials and younger people are going to be a very large demographic voting bloc. How do we get them involved?
So I'm not one to blame voters for being disenfranchised. So if there's a certain block of voters that don't vote or don't participate, I want to understand why. I don't think it's a very good strategy whatsoever to shame them and say, what's wrong with you? You don't have any right to complain. Like all this stuff you hear people saying. That is not going to engage voters. Just stop. Just stop. You have to understand why didn't they come out? Talk to them. Ask them about their lives. Learn a little bit about folks in that age group if they didn't turn out, or if a particular demographic didn't turn out. Reach out to them. Talk to them about, what's going on, the circumstances going on in their lives, and then apply it to politics, and then they may turn out. I mean, this was what was great about Bernie's campaign was Bernie was talking about all sorts of social ills that regular folks, working people, were facing. And it really appealed to younger voters because they, couldn't get a good paying job. They were faced with tens of thousands of dollars of student debt. He was talking straight to them about stuff that they were dealing with. Like they maybe had parents who couldn't get health care or went into debt because of health care. So because he was talking about that stuff and he wasn't shaming them at all, he was really listening to folks all around the country who were coming to him and saying, this is what I'm going through. And then he was talking about it. And then those people said, he's talking about me. And then they voted. That's what you need to do. And I'm seeing a ton of shaming going on after this election, especially with the 3% millennials. I don't know. I haven't seen any real evidence that is the true statistic. I've heard a lot of people saying it, but that turnout was low among millennials, and I think we really, really need to understand why millennials didn't turn out, talk to them, and apply their life circumstances to politics and work with them to see what they need in order to get engaged, rather than just telling them they're a piece of crap and you have no right to complain, you're a loser. Like, the stuff I'm hearing is terrible.
Could the criticism of the reason why maybe there wasn't a turnout, especially here in Illinois, because if we look at other elections as well as midterms in other states, there was a high turnout. But here in Illinois, I guess maybe because of the history of corruption, Illinois politics, and also, of course, the 2016 presidential election cycle, is it just that people are still really bitter and angry about how the DNC handled the primaries, especially stealing the nomination for Bernie Sanders. It's quite clear that there was clear election fraud, and the DNC establishment was turning a blind eye to what was happening.
I mean, anytime there's corruption or you see like, you know, billionaire candidates or people that you don't feel like represent you or have anything to do with your lives or will impact you in any way, then it's not gonna appeal to you. So I think the state of politics in Illinois is a completely disenfranchising state of affairs. It's terrible. I'm surprised anyone votes. It's so corrupt. So I don't blame anyone for not voting. I always vote. That's just me. I still feel like I have to keep fighting. I wake up every day with an urge to keep fighting. That's just how I am. But other people might say, what's the point?
So let's look at the current DNC leadership. Can it be seen as an ally? And is there any way in which it can be reformed? And also, is it possible time for progressives and independents to form a new party? I mean, will there ever be a point to where progressives and independents just had enough of just dealing with the resistance from the DNC establishment to where we have to build a new party?
I mean, ideally, I think we would be a country that has many parties. The obstacles that have been set up for a viable third party or people to run as independents are incredible.
Especially
they're set up to fail. They are completely set up to fail. People have problems with the way the Green Party's run or whatever, and they have to keep in mind that they're set up to fail. They really are. It's a two-party system. I definitely think both parties of the Democrats and Republicans have major corruption problems, like completely. So I don't think the best system would be to keep those two parties going as is. So something has to change if we want it to improve. It would be great if we could come up with, a multi-party system, ranked choice voting, like all these paths to a better democracy.
All right, and as we end this episode, in case there's people who are watching us who want to learn more about Our Revolution Illinois, where can they find out more about your organization, volunteer, or even reach out to you guys?
Okay, well, we have a Facebook page, Our Revolution Illinois. You can also go to our website, which is ourrevolutionil.com. And if you want to reach out to me personally, I am shana@ourrevolutionil.com.
All right, Shana, thank you so much for joining Heartlands Media. You've been such a huge help for us in some of our past work. All the best to you, and clearly the fight is not over, and we all need to contribute and really build for a better future. So thank you again, Shana. And for all our viewers who are watching us, if there is a story or a group or an individual that you feel that we should interview, you can reach out to us on our webpage. That's www.hardlensmedia.com. That way you can learn more about us, how you can help, check us out on our other social media sites. Plus we have a specific link for you guys to reach out to us and tell us about maybe some grassroots activists or organizations or perhaps a candidate who's running for office so that we can learn more about them and actually have them on our show or even interview them on our radio show. Your help and contributions really help us out, and we're very grateful for whatever information you send us. So peace, everyone. Let's all do what we can to build a better future.
You're watching Hard Lens Media.